Welcome to the Freedom Founder. I'm your host, Zach Duggar. I'm excited to have our guest, Jonathan Mueller, joining us today. I want to make a note. 97% of self-made entrepreneurs say they would never go back to traditional employment. I'm excited to have a person today that can speak to that and speak to the topic of getting through traditional W-2 employment and moving into his own company, and also starting a second company. So welcome in.
Hey, Zach, it is so good to be here. Count me in that 97%. I cannot even begin to imagine going back to being a W-2. And in fact, we'll chat more about this, but like my entrepreneurial journey started like 14, 15 years ago with a nonprofit. And I got a taste there, went back to the big corporation, and then said, hey, I know what my path is. It's all about being an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. I love it. I love that. I feel the same. So, but you, like you said, you weren't always an entrepreneur. Now you're the CEO and co-founder of two companies. But let's talk a little bit about that journey, though. How you got started, where you came from to where you are today.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. 25 years ago, when I graduated college, I did what I dutifully thought I was supposed to do. I went off and became a management consulting or management consultant for a couple years in Chicago. Then went to sell supply chain software, and I'll tell you what, Zach. Very quickly, I realized I was not put on this earth to sell supply chain software, and I realized I've described myself to this day as a recovering management consultant. Taught me amazing things, but I came into autism services and ABA therapy in a very non-traditional manner. But worked for 5 years with a large national ABA provider. Gosh, this was starting 10 years ago. I've been in the field for over a decade, and had an opportunity actually that ABA company went through a private equity transaction, which is fine. That stuff happens. Two of the regional directors and I got laid off. And this was October 2017. My first thought, Zach, I kid you not, I was like, I mean, it's an ego thing, right? I had survived so many layoffs in Silicon Valley and in the consulting world and in all walks of life up until that point in my career. So not only was I thinking, wow, what did I do or not do that I could have done differently? That was gut wrenching. Having to tell my parents, my wife, we had 3 young kids at the time. But I very quickly stepped back and said, hang on a second, this is not about me. This is about my family. And more importantly, this is about what I want to accomplish on this earth. And so I actually, 2 of my co-founders, I had to said, who were also regional directors, got laid off with me, Dr. Mike Wright and Will Bainig. We said, let's go build the organization that we've always wanted to be a part of. Let's build an organization that cares about its team first and foremost, that cares about clinical quality, that recognizes there's a lot of bad ABA out there. There's a lot of awesome ABA, and let's take the components that make the most sense for us. Let's think about ABA more holistically and other needs of families, and from mental health support to sibling support to the ability to get a diagnosis and then help a family go through that grieving process that they tell us they have when when they get a diagnosis of autism. So that was a phenomenal opportunity 5 years ago, and it's been we're not a huge organization, about 170 team members across 3 states, Colorado, Arizona, Texas. But it's been a phenomenal learning journey. And that led to starting Element RCM, which is a billing and insurance partner to ABA providers, because there's just a lot of compliance stuff that's happening in our field now. And we said we need billing partners for ABA companies to help those 7,000 ABA providers out there get it right. So that's a little bit about my journey. I'd say I'm addicted to being an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. I think one thing I didn't even realize is that you were in supply chain. Maybe if you had stuck with it, we wouldn't have the issues that we're having today. Maybe not, but
right. It's true. It's funny, Zach. There's actually so much in common between supply chain issues that happen totally independent of healthcare and just all of the hundreds, not hundreds, thousands of things that have to go right to make sure you've got a kiddo you're ready to serve. You've got a team member there who's well trained and well supported, ready to serve them. So true.
Yeah, so that transfer of those skills into just a new area of work and basically what is a different field, but at the same time, you can still take from what you know and learned and apply it to what you're doing now. Yeah, no, that's, and then in that process, you mentioned that you've had to make some adjustments. You were seeing some things on the horizon, and so you looked at what you could do not only for your own company but also for others, and starting Element RCM. You mentioned compliance and some of the issues there, and kind of talk about that a little bit. Tell me about what was happening or what you're seeing in the forecast, and that is an area that you started to focus in on.
Yeah, Zach, it's surprising, but in our experience, ABA providers collect on average 75% of the revenue for the services they deliver, which is nuts. Think about that. In what other business, are you only collecting 75 cents on the dollar? And in ABA, we are providing life-changing services, literally life-changing services to kiddos and families living with
Right.
autism. And so,
Yep.
so that was one challenge that we saw out there. Another challenge,
Yeah.
I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, but this idea that winter is coming for the ABA field, and I don't want to be a pessimist. But I want to be a realist, and I think this is a really important message, and that is that we have gotten funding as a field very recently, only within the last decade or so, has
Yep.
Medicaid and commercial insurance companies started paying for services, which means for the 7,000 ABA providers out there, many ABA providers just don't know the compliance regime and the set of things that have to happen in revenue cycle and clinical services and in a whole variety of aspects of organizations that candidly the rest of the healthcare world has come to know and maybe not love, but at least
Right.
accept and develop systems around. And so compliance becomes this almost potentially dirty word. It's like, oh, it's extra cost. And I tend to see it very differently. This is an investment that helps protect you and your team members and the clients you serve in the long run. And so knowing that this stuff was happening, we said we need solutions that certainly solve those challenges, right? So
Yeah.
for the 75 cents on the dollar, how do you put in the right upstream systems around prior authorization obtainment, contracting, credentialing the right way?
Yep.
Determining insurance eligibility and verification, and then re-verification ongoing for your clients. How do you do a pre-billing claims drive? All this stuff, right? This already happens in the rest of healthcare. All that stuff that needs to come
Yep.
to our field and to ABA providers. It's putting that in place, but it's more than that, Zach. I think at my heart, I love being a teacher and sharing knowledge. And there's this expression. Actually, I first heard it from Dr. John Austin, whom I know you and I both know in common. Tremendous individual, but
Yeah.
he describes a long time ago. The saying was, the best place to store food is in your friend's belly. And I think the analog to that now is the best place to store knowledge is in your friend's head. And that's my passion in life, is not only
Okay.
helping ABA providers to solve for those things, those really hard and transient issues, but also better equip them with an understanding of and ability to follow through on creating really strong compliance, revenue cycle, and other regimens to keep them on the up and up.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I think that you're seeing an area that is on the horizon, as you mentioned, and it's coming in different waves with different states, sometimes with the state insurance that is out there, as well as the commercial insurance. And I think that is definitely a need. And I think it's great that you're working to fulfill that and help others that are, it's just not an area we get taught in school. So it's not an area that we're familiar with. You have to develop that skill set, or work with someone like yourself and partner alongside of someone that can help bring that to the table. Yeah.
Yeah, Zach, I'll add one other, for instance, on what's
Mhm.
happening out there right now. I'm a huge Christmas fan, by the way. We start celebrating
Yep.
Christmas in my family like after Halloween. But there's also this movie came out a few years ago called Krampus. I don't know if you've
Okay.
seen it, but it's the evil Santa Claus. And so anyway, it's the same guys from Severance, which, by the way, great show. I just started watching
Okay.
that same main character. But I feel our field has a Krampus moment coming, this evil Santa Claus. Like, when is this going to pop? And that moment is going to be a result of the Office of Inspector General doing audits across state Medicaid ABA
Yeah.
programs and questionable billing and other practices. And those
Sure.
audits were being done in 2022. In 2023, the report's going to come out. And I'm happy
Yep.
to put it here in the chat so listeners can see it. But this is going to be a similar moment to several years ago when TRICARE came out. If you remember the damning report that something like 70% of kiddos who went through
Yep.
ABA, we're not benefiting from it or something to that effect.
Right.
But this is why I want to be a light on the hill and make sure our field understands that this winter is coming, that Krampus is somewhere around the corner. But the great news is that there's with intention,
Yep.
there are resources and lots out there to inoculate against these things.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to know, a lot to learn. I mean, not just in what you're doing, but also just that process of starting the business and able to get it up to where it is today, to go from of 3 people to 170 team members. Can you talk a little bit about that process of kind of that conversation with those 3 team members that had been laid off from the current or the prior position, and then moving it from just that group to where it is today, and also that size and the growth over 3 states? I mean, that's something for someone who is just getting started. That almost seems unfathomable. Like, how would I operate out of not just where I live, but in another state and location? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually have very vivid memories of these conversations, partly because, I had much more time in my hands. And so one of my co-founders Will Bainig, who's in the Denver area, we would go on mountain bike rides. It's like beautiful fall colors. And we're like, hey, let's
Yep.
go get out after it. And, what we talked a heck of a lot about was actually not the potential organization, but we did a lot of reflection on the last 5-6 years. He and I had worked together at this large
Yeah.
national provider, and
Yep.
we just said, hey, what were the things that were going really well, and then what were the things that we think could be changed to best serve families, to best create a culture of professional development, training, high quality supervision, support of team career pathing for team members. And so it was a lot of that reflection that very naturally we kind of looked at each other in the eyes on one break. We were on the Apex Trail in Golden and coming down this phenomenal little run, and we had stopped to take a break. We looked at each other. And we're like, this is something that we need. We would be remiss not to try to explore this.
Yep.
And he had been having some conversations with Dr. Mike. And so the 3 of us looped in, and we just all had this really strong conviction for the kinds of services, more inclusive services of a range of
Yep.
different disciplines and therapy disciplines, and of just building a great cultured organization. We said, let's do it.
That's great. Had one of you operated a business yourselves before?
Yeah, so I had started a nonprofit in the
Okay.
Reno Lake Tahoe area around outdoor
Yep.
education. Grew that over about 5-6 years. That was 2006 to 2012, actually immediately before I got into the ABA field. So a little bit of understanding of that, and then each of the 3 of us owned the P&L across several of our regions. That is, we were directly
Okay.
responsible for our team member satisfaction,
Yep.
our financial performance, clinical quality, everything else.
Yep.
So there was that experience. But I'll tell you what I've learned, Zach, in entrepreneurship, as you learn a little bit more, it opens up a door to so much more that I realized I did not know. It's like this never
Right.
ending process or experience, but that was okay. I think, the approach we took very early on was, look, we literally cannot have all the answers at the get-go. As much as we want to put it into our business
Yep.
plan and this great like pitch deck we showed, and to get feedback from friends and others, like, we can't solve all that. What can we do? We can
Yep.
create an organizational learning mindset that seeks to constantly learn from where we failed, and do things differently, and where we succeeded. In fact, my co-founder Will and I, we've had a weekly meeting for the last 5+ years called our weekly hypothesis check.
Yep.
And the explicit goal is, what are the hypotheses we had, and did those bear out or not, right? And double down on the things that went well and get rid of the stuff or retool the stuff that hasn't gone well. And I don't know if this is a badge of honor, but we're at over 300 pages of notes on a Google Doc
Wow.
for those
Yeah.
5 years.
It sounds like eventually you could put that together and summarize the book on the journey and the process. You've got the document. It's all recorded.
Maybe so. You know, Zach, there's a great book out there by Scott Belsky, I think he's chief
Okay.
product officer at Adobe, and he had his own startup. But the book is called
Yep.
The Messy Middle, and you know, there's a lot of glamorizing of entrepreneurship. And look, I mean, I'm the most passionate entrepreneur there is out there, and I love entrepreneurship. But what people don't talk about, people talk about beginnings and endings. They don't talk
Yeah.
about the messy middle and just
Sure.
how hard it is day to day, grinding out and trying to create an organization of value that's living up to its mission and that can grow and better serve its mission and clients and team members in the future. So that's been a little bit of my guide along the way, but
Yeah.
who knows, I'll have to create, maybe we'll turn those 300 pages at some point into something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's great to be able to learn from those that have come before, and like you said, realize that there is that point at which you've gotten it started. You're not editing, but you're working through the process in the middle, and to be able to continue to figure that as you go. And I really think that your process, you're showing, walking that out. You mentioned in comment to me that you've had satisfaction surveys that have continued to improve and continue to be positive, and that's the culture and environment you're trying to create. I think it's just really impressed me to watch your journey and to hear from you and what you're doing and to see that be out. So I would love to continue this conversation. I think that we're going to have to come back and revisit it at some point in the future. But if we did have anybody who would like to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can search for me, Jonathan
Okay.
Mueller there. You could shoot me an email anytime, Jonathan, JONATHAN, at elementrcm.ai. And I am always available. And like I said, I love to give out knowledge as freely and widely as I possibly can. So any and all questions are welcome.
Okay. That sounds great. I appreciate that. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask this one last question I mentioned that I would ask. It's my $1 million question today. So if you were given $1 million to invest in your business, how would you use those funds? Just kind of big picture.
Yep. Okay, so two things. I'm going to cheat on you, Zach. I'm going to say two things, maybe $500,000 for each. One, I would create an open source, openly available knowledge center of compliance specific to ABA to make sure our field had all the info it needed around every aspect of compliance that we're going to be expected to operate under.
I love that.
Since we're medical necessity. The second part of it is going to speak to the we have a supply demand imbalance of providers. That is no secret. And I don't know that we're just going to be able to churn out enough as a country, as a field to do that. And so there are examples in other medical professions in which other countries who have English speaking language and training programs and access to to a workforce who wants to work. I would love to figure out a way, and probably take some lobbying through Congress because our whole immigration system needs to be reformed, but find a way to get those highly trained people over to the US and serving kids with autism.
I love it. I think that's wonderful. Thank you. And I don't mind that you kind of cheated and looked at the bigger picture, not just within your own organization, but beyond. So I love that about you. You're just a giving individual. So, and again, if anyone does have a desire, reach out to Jonathan at elementrcm.ai. Got that correct?
Nailed it.
All right, good deal. All right. And if anyone out there is a burgeoning entrepreneur or you're a successful entrepreneur in your field, we want to hear from you as well. So you can read me at zach@thefreedomfinder.com. So thank you again, Jonathan. Appreciate the time to speak with you today.
Zach, it's been a pleasure, brother. Thank you.